So today on the AI Files, we'll be unpacking how AI earns its right to burn so much power
And why OpenAI just hit Code Red on ChatGPT.
and how governments like the Health and Human Services plan to govern the use of AI, as well as what new AWS and Mistral models mean to builders on the front lines.
And I think everybody missed this, Jimmy. Microsoft released a new computer use focused small language model called Farra. That and more. We'll talk. Just stay tuned for a quick introduction. Greetings. Welcome to the AI Files podcast. If you're looking to stay up to date on the AI, this is the podcast for you. I'm Shadab Hussain. I'm the director of AI at Microsoft, and I'm your co-host.
Hello, everybody. Jamie Basilico, as you know already. I'm the other co-host here for the AI Files. My day job is a data and AI technical specialist and architect. And as a reminder, please note this is not an official Microsoft channel, so the views and opinions expressed by myself and Shadab are our own and do not represent the views of Microsoft. Okay, so this week we had a really interesting interview with Satya Nadella, who everyone probably knows is the CEO of Microsoft. And he spoke with the chair of Politico, who is actually the CEO of Axel Springer, and that person is Matthias Steffner. So the quote that Satya said, and verbatim reading word for word, at the end of the day, I think that this industry to which I belong needs to earn the social permission to consume energy because we're doing good in the world. So what that really means, take that back, is this interview, long form conversation. Definitely go out and take a read at it or listen to it if you can. We'll post that into the show notes. But this was a core claim around data center growth. Obviously, to run all the things that we're using as far as AI needs a lot of power, and it needs a lot of commitment from those systems, countries, the different groups that are actually consuming that power. So it's about data center growth is really straining the power systems that we're all using these tools on. And there's definitely some legitimacy in the demands and its dependency on what this means for not only the companies and how they're like benefiting from these tools, but also it's a shared responsibility for the gains and the growth and the power consumption. So this goes back to the quote in the sense that we have to earn the social permission. We have to get the permission from the society at large that this is something we want to move forward with, because again, it is straining the power system that we have. So the wider backdrop of really what Satya was getting at is that, there's right now today, there's obviously core companies, these foundational companies that are really pushing the use of these, not only tools, but in the power. And his point of view is that this needs to be diffused a little bit where there's multiple winners. And it's not a company thing that he's really getting at. It's really where the winners in all of this and the use of that demand and the power really needs to be put back not only in the companies, but also the people that are using this, the people that are putting forth their resources, their time to make this a fruition. So this is about building efficiency or really be left behind, because if we don't drive forward to optimize the things that we need to do as far as AI, whether it's the models, inferencing, the things that we need to do to run these different tools in and of themselves, just as like cooling power and the renewables, this is going to be something that will stop and stifle the things that we need to do. So again, this is really like table stakes that we need an all-in agreement from society and obviously companies that are driving forward on the technology to be able to do this. So, value is the value in what we collectively have really must be spread. So it's about these ecosystems and not monopolies as far as companies that are really going to be able to build this. And we need to think about designing for interoperability, being able to have industry uptake on the things that we're really trying to build and have real productivity gains across the board, across those different industries, across different societal use of these things. So it's not only about organizational change, but it's also about the IT upgrades that will enable this. So, part of this also, and again, it's a long discussion, but most IT projects or most AI projects within IT fall because they're treated like traditional IT projects. So leaders need to learn or unlearn the things that they're used to as far as these different old habits and really rewire their brains for this new workflow on AI end to end. And again, this comes back to why, his underpinning of this quote is important, because it's about earning that social permission. How do we need to collectively think about that change? And part of this change is thinking about the empathy and the social intelligence that this is going to drive, the EQ. And that's going to be a critical part in how we think about AI augmenting the workforce. Again, it goes back to taking that social permission to really drive what we're looking to do. So anyway, that was the backdrop. I thought it was interesting. If you get, I think this podcast is 45 minutes or almost an hour long, to what Satya had with Matthias. So worth the listen. He goes into a lot more depth, obviously, than I just did, but at the core and crux of it, that's really what is important, at least for us, because we really start to think about, what do we need to think through? It's not just energy, but it's that full stack that's really supporting and driving the needs. Because if society doesn't see the need for AI, we're never going to get the buy-in to, drive forward the huge investment, not only in money, but also time that is required to really build these things out.
Yeah, and Jamie, well said. And there are other aspects as well, to the point that how did society see AI, right? I mean, does it see real net benefits coming out of it? Some of the aspects are, for example, if you see, I don't know about your state, Jamie, but electricity has become very expensive in the state of New Jersey, right? And it's been like, in some of the cases, like almost double up the bill. And one of the reason is that because of the increased data center demand for the electricity, right? So that is also driving. So there is a way, in a way, there is a cost to all this, right? I mean, the AI is ultimately making some of the things expensive for others. The other aspect is that, in the name of AI, we have many times company claim, or we are going to reduce the staff and do the layoffs because of use of AI, and they're trying to sell it to their board, but they don't understand that that creates a problem, because people then start feeling that, okay, the AI is actually bringing a negative benefit to the society, right? So overall, I think it's a game that has its own pros and cons, and so, as you said, I like this term, like social permission. Social permission involve all of these things together. The net benefit to the society, what is it driving towards? Will people will become more resilient, actually. If they see negativity, they will start becoming like it's the same phenomena, right? Like people will start buying Tesla. And if the people stop using AI because they feel that it's ultimately going to harm the society and overall, then it becomes a problem. That's what I think Satya also meant from a social permission point of view.
Yeah.
Very important to earn the social permission.
Very true. So on to some rapid news. I think you have some news about OpenAI and what is Code Red.
Always, the OpenAI is always in the news. So Code Red, basically, this became actually a viral news this week about there is a memo out there. Sam Altman has it's an internal leaked memo. Of course, they have never confirmed it, but apparently he has written an internal memo about Google is catching up. Privately, that memo has gone out to the company, and he's talking about that there is a Code Red situation, because one of the reason is basically Gemini model, Gemini Pro 3 is very good. In fact, Sam Altman has publicly actually admired that model as well. But what is also happening is, Gemini, there is this growth, right? The amount of download that ChatGPT drives, and the global monthly active user, they still are pretty high, right? I mean, they still had, like, for example, they had 180% year-on-year growth. But what is happening is that the Google has started to catch up. Their download outpaced OpenAI. The amount of time people have started spending is now a little bit more, right? And particularly the people who have both. And for example, Mark Benioff, right, the Salesforce CEO, he talked about, I've been using ChatGPT for the last 3 years every single day, and I tried Gemini, and I can't go back now. So that is what is actually driving some momentum towards the Gemini and the Google, and that's what Sam Altman is really worried about, and he should be, because if you see, like from 4.0 to 5 or 5.1 and all these things, I think they're not that leap, I would say. And clearly, when it comes to the model, I think the OpenAI has started falling back. From you can see that in all the Alamarinas leaderboard, you can see in all the benchmarks, the models are good, the Gemini models are good, the Claude models are better. And, the only thing is that OpenAI already has that brand image, right, about the Chat GPT, and it integrates, it's a great conversation assistant, AI assistant. They are still at the top. But you can see that the trend is going towards Google, and that's what this Code Red is about.
Yeah, you can never rest on your laurels. That's the way I look at it, is that you have to constantly reinvent, innovate, and drive forward. And I don't want to say that OpenAI has been stale. They just haven't progressed as far and at the trajectory that Google has.
Yeah.
To your point, I've always, for the, I don't know what it's been, the last year and a half, 2 years, paid subscriber of OpenAI, still am. But I started to subscribe to Google, to Gemini, in the last, whatever it was, 2 months. I had a trial, but now I'm a monthly paid user, and I do see myself using Google and Gemini a little bit more in some cases. I'll give you a great example. the imaging or the image capability with Image One, it's okay. I was blown away when it first came out with OpenAI, but Nano Banana, Pro is just amazing. So I've started to gravitate more towards Gemini, and I'm in there more than I was, 3 weeks ago, and it may still grow. So I'm just one person, but that's probably a microcosm of the examples that are happening across, and maybe that's why Code Red became a thing.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Jamie. And one of the things I feel that it is also there are two things here, right? So if you see, OpenAI is trying to do a lot of things, right? And they're trying to be everywhere. They want to create that device. They want to be in like video generation. They are like trying to do a lot of things. Anthropic, on the other hand, is very focused. They are actually focusing on enterprise use cases. They're not trying to draw a lot more growth in the consumer. In fact, Dario Amado, actually, he talked about it, that, okay, look, from our point of view, we are focused on enterprise. And why you see this Code Red, etc., going on, because there is a race among Google and OpenAI particularly to gain more audience. And that's what is driving this whole race, and to get to the better and better model, because they're fighting in that very competitive consumer space. Dario's point of view is that Anthropic is focusing more on the enterprise, and that's true. I mean, they're not trying to do a lot of things. Honestly, they're trying to focus on specific things, particularly the coding and enterprise use cases, and they're really good at it. Google is also trying to do a lot of things, and they've got a lot of ground, but they are a big company, so they've thrown a lot of resources. OpenAI is comparatively small, so I think that's one thing. The other thing I also feel, Jamie, that this is something lesson for corporate. When you lose good people, it ultimately will show up. 1.5 years ago, what happened with OpenAI? They did lose a lot of good people, right? I mean, some of these stalwarts like Ilya and Andre Karpathy and bunch of other. Ultimately, that starts showing up in the product roadmap, etc. And they still have they still have a really good talent base, no doubt about it. But still, it shows up, So I think it is also related to the talent quality. Never ever ignore that part. Sam Altman kind of became a loner now, right? I mean, he was trying to fight this battle, and he has done a pretty good job, I would say, from a business savviness point of view. All these deal making, etc., incredible work that he has done. But the core is the product, and you are only as good as your model nowadays. That's a reality of the AI world.
Yeah, and if you lose that focus, then it shows up. So,
Yep.
we'll see where Code Red comes or what it delivers.
And one thing also, Jamie, I quickly want to also talk about it. What does it mean for the enterprise, right? Where we basically focus, right? Our podcast is focused on the corporate and the enterprise. So what does it mean? How does in a corporate, behave in this race, right? I mean, should they also keep switching model? I would say my point of view is that, look, there are differences, and there are noticeable differences in some of these models, but I don't think that the business need to worry about and become start switching. Okay, this week with Gemini, and the 2 weeks later some other. That's not the strategy to go about. The reality is that most of the enterprise and corporates are still catching up. To be honest, they can still do with the GPT 3.5 capabilities today, right? Because they still haven't caught up. So many times I've seen the enterprises are trying to also follow that race. It's a rat race where, okay, let's get everybody. Let's get Google also in the mix. Let's get OpenAI. Let's sign up for all the models access, right? And then we will evaluate. Well, the reality is that these companies are running at such a high pace, Jamie, that by the time you finish your evaluation, another model will drop in. So don't become part of that rat race. Pick a partner, pick a provider, stick with them. You know that there are 3 or 4 players who really they will figure it out. And a week or so comparative advantage that you gain, it's basically I would say it's a race that you cannot keep up with. So don't try to be in that race. Try to focus on the quality use cases, and be with one provider and deliver the value.
Yeah, well said. It's having a conviction and staying with it. So on to some other news, because we got a lot to cover today as well. The U.S. Health and Human Services actually announced a 20-page AI strategy, and it documented 5 different pillars for what they're going to follow. One is that they're going to actually create a governance structure that's going to manage risk. They're going to design a suite of AI resources that can be used across the department. It's going to empower employees to actually use the AI tools that they build, and that kind of goes back to an announcement that they made with the OpenAI, actually, to use ChatGPT. But they're also going to set aside funding programs to set standards for the use of AI in research and development. And last but not least, they're going to incorporate AI into the public health and patient care applications that they have. So one of the core things that was announced is really this try first culture, which is going to focus on like how can they incorporate these different tools. There are some things, though. I mean, there's always some naysayers. It's about the privacy of data. which again, you could correlate this. It doesn't have to be in the US. It could be any health agency in any government across the world. It's about the data itself and how secure is that can be. Do you have the right risk controls associated with it? So, you do have that being said, and I'm sure that will be things that are looked at. And that's obviously part of the strategy that they put forth as well. Like I said, real quick news on that. We'll see where that moves forward, but there is a lot of interest in AI at the governmental level here in the US, and I'm sure that's the same, and I know it's the same across other government agencies across different countries.
True. I think that could be a good blueprint for a lot of agencies to follow as well. Good start, I would say. Okay. In the launches segment, we have lots of launches. Jimmy, you're going to talk about the AWS. Let me start with one of the launch that I think did not get much news, and it's not supposed to be that viral anywhere right now, but it was about a specific small language model that Microsoft launched. It's called Fara, and it is particularly built for computer use. So this model is a small language model. It can, one of the things is that because it is small, it can actually run on the edge, right, on the devices, which means that you can actually use a computer edge agent on the devices without having the data to leave that particular device. So that's one of the thing about this. The other thing is that it is built on a lot of one of the innovation was the synthetic data, because it's hard to get the data set, the reliable data set for the computer usage. And so they actually kind of innovated on the approach, their three-step approach through which they created a synthetic data sets. And that's what actually they used this particular model. Now, this model is actually specifically for the research purpose. So it is not something that you can simply download and use for. It's in the research, it's in the preview. They're inviting the collaboration. You can apply. Anybody who's interested working with them, they can apply. It's also open weights. It's available with through the Hugging Face and Microsoft Foundry for anybody to actually try out. But remember, it's still in the research and the preview, but they are developing it specifically to focus on the edge use cases and the computer use agent. And it is built on actually the Quen, which is another open source, open weight model from Quen is, I think, from Alibaba. So that is what is the new model. And it's interesting, the approach, because many times, the approach has been like fairly large models for the computer use, but this is a very small model, actually, if you look at it. So let's see how that work out. It's only $7 billion parameters. So it's a fairly small, and it has a pretty high, I would say, the performance to cost ratio. It works pretty well compared to, let's say, the other models they have compared against OpenAI and other agents as well.
Interesting. Yeah, no, it's I like the small footprint. I think when you say it's only a 7 billion parameter model, which is relatively small, so that could definitely run on edge devices. I know I'm running bigger models on my rig that I have here. Anyway, so Amazon, AWS, they had their big conference, reInvent, just this past, what was it, last week? Time is flying by.
This week, actually.
This week, yes. Seemed like it was almost 2 weeks ago. So yeah, just this past Monday. By the way, we're recording this December 5th. So again, just a couple of days ago, depending on when you're listening to this. So there was a lot of announcements. It would take us probably 2 hours just to go through everything that's in there. We're not going to do that. What I'm going to give you is a sort of my top 5 from reInvent that have a real potential impact on things that we do in AI. I'll go past the 5 and do like sort of a noteworthy mention. But here we go. This is not in any order, so it's not like here's number 1. It's just 5 things that I kind of picked out of that. So Amazon Nova Forge. So this is where you're able to build your own frontier models on top of the Nova models. So this is actually a service. By the way, it's not cheap. It's $100,000 a year that lets enterprises start from the, what I'm going to call it's like the early or mid-training checkpoints to create the Nova models. But this is where you could bring in your own proprietary data and create a bespoke model off of that without having to train from scratch. And if anyone has tried to do, fine tuning, that's hard in and of itself. But this is actually starting from the training steps of that. So it's not even fine tuning. It's actually part of the pre and mid training of that. So what's interesting, that $100,000 a year allows you to do this early injection of your data. The models will be hosted on AWS. Obviously, the reason why this is important, this goes way beyond just fine tuning a RAG, but this is about letting yourself steer the model and steering the behavior based upon that training data, which is going to be crucial for enterprise hierarchy domain specific reasoning, where you want to have that data. And typically where, late stage fine tuning may not actually catch all those things. So this injects that way earlier. So this will certainly, it suppresses cost. If you've heard any of the things that we've talked about or just listen to other things, to train your own model, you're talking millions of dollars, if not multi-millions, right? And this allows you to do it for 100K. So that's a fraction of what it would potentially cost. So that's important for large enterprises. All right, so that's number one. Number two is Amazon's Nova Act. So this is the ability for have UI automation agents in the browser. So this is a fully managed AWS service that will enable you to build fleets of production-grade AI agents that will drive browser interaction. Think things like clicking, typing, navigating, extracting information, and being able to do it with a greater than 90% task reliability, with also having human-in-the-loop controls, as well as then the ability to do tool calling and not having to do any coding. And again, it's powered by the AWS models. In this case, it's actually the Nova 2 Lite, which I'll talk about Nova models in a minute. But it's powered by that, with the ability to actually do some synthetic training based upon web gems, or at least what they call that. Obviously, why this matters is it's all about reliability on being able to do these browser-oriented agents. So a trained model being able to orchestrate and then call tool calling. So this actually enables to do state-of-the-art, not only state-of-the-art models, but then being able to actually align that with your enterprise applications and its ability to call those. So this is obviously immediate, and the reasons why you should care. Being able to bring out tangible ROI from the ability to automate various different tasks at scale, while also being able to actually drive real customer gains for other things that you're looking to do. So that's number two. Number three, again, I'm jumping around a little bit, but this one's going to be very important for the things that we try to do. And that's about building systems that are tied to your data. Go back to what I just mentioned before about Nova Forge. That's obviously doing it at the pre-training step. But what if now you have all this data? Maybe you don't want to spend the $100,000 to do the Nova Forge. But if you're a company that's already invested in AWS and have your data in S3, well, what they're putting forth is the ability to do S3 vectors, and this is now generally available. So this is native vector storage and search capable within S3 buckets. So it's one of the first major cloud companies to be able to do native storage. Yeah, there's some things that Microsoft is working on as well, especially within OneLake, but this is directly from Amazon through their S3 storage mechanisms. So this, if you worked and played with this in preview mode, you know that there was some limitations in terms of the amount of vectors that could be per index and the latency that was associated with it. Well, this jumps that up from 50 million vectors to now it's 2 billion vectors per index. So just a vast amount of data that could be stored and vectorized, and the ability to do this at a very cost optimized model, but it's already in the data that you're using within S3. So it's a matter of just turning on capabilities. So what this brings and why it matters to you as a listener, you get RAG, you get multimodal search and agent memory just directly out of this. So this will simplify the pipelines and the things that you actually have to create basically an automatic RAG pattern directly off of that data. So you could think of it this way: you collapse your architecture and the things, if you, instead of going out and building, RAG data, let's say in Pinecone or a specialized vector store, you don't need to do that anymore. You've got it right there within S3. So this is definitely something that's advantageous. Obviously, it also integrates with Bedrock and the various different open search tools, and it rides right alongside of S3's durability. So all the things that you think about in terms of scale and availability, it just comes with it. So very compelling for large enterprises and large enterprises that have large estates already in terms of that data on S3, and also being compliance sensitive because it rides on the back of S3. All right. Number 4, I'm trying to go through these rapid fashion here. Trainium. So this is AWS's hardware. So this is a new Trainium 3. It supports up to 4 times the amount of compute, 4 times the amount of memory bandwidth, and is more performant per kilowatt of usage. Go back to what we were mentioning before with Satya and his quote about being better social partners with, hungry memory, electric hungry systems that need to do this. So again, this is AWS and what they're putting. So this is a credible non-NVIDIA path for frontier scale training, for inferencing. And this will inevitably enable a greater supply chain, because now you're not just solely relying on NVIDIA. This is yet again another chip play, and AWS is getting in that as well. So this is really driving hardware economics, which then drives AI strategy. So this is really de-risking some of the factors around GPUs as supplied by NVIDIA. One last one, again, top 5 that I would say as far as reInvent is AWS AI Factory. So this is fully managed on-prem infrastructure. So AWS will literally come in and deploy racks of managed AI infrastructure, combining things like Nova, Bedrock, SageMaker services, and using, whether or not it's this Trainium or NVIDIA hardware to do all the things that are needed. Everything from the storage to networking, all inside of these custom customer data centers to meet whether it's data residency or sovereignty requirements. So again, this is a way of thinking about sovereign AI and doing it with the class of tools and the services that AWS brings together. Honorable mention, Bedrock Agent Core. This helps to move agents from prototype into production. Nova, I did kind of loosely mention Nova 2 Lite, but this is the family of models. They've got Nova Lite, Nova Pro, Sonic, and Omni, enabling multi-million token context. So to me, is Nova groundbreaking? No, especially when you look at things like Opus from Anthropic and Gemini, Gemini 3 Pro and OpenAI, but they're good models. And when we look at that family, it's picking which things that you want to use. So they've got a portfolio, again, multimodal, goes against reasoning, speech, and overall multimodality. Last but not least is reinforcement fine-tuning on Bedrock and a serverless model to customize things inside of SageMaker AI. So while those are all good, the 5 that I went through, I think are more impactful. So anyway, that was rapid. I think I did that in about 10 minutes, give or take, but a lot that came out of reInvent, and there's a ton more. We'll put in the show notes to go read it if you haven't read it already. So
that's a pretty good, concise summary, Jamie.
Thanks. So I know you've got some things on Mistral 3 to take us out. This will be the last announcement.
Yeah, to close it, Mistral is still working. So Mistral large model, it's been some time since they released a large version. Okay, so their last large version was released almost a year ago, and which is kind of already lined up for the deprecation and the retirement. And there were some questions about, are they going to release their large? But here it is. Yes, they did release the large finally. It took some time. They have done some medium releases earlier in the year, but this is almost after a year they have released a large. Sometimes the companies have been releasing large or ditching the large altogether. For example, Meta did, like, we never heard about that. What was that Behemoth model? Opus 4.5 took some time as well. And similarly, now Mistral has come up with the large 3 family of model. But along with that, they also actually released a bunch of small models. In fact, 3 variants of the small models, which is what they call as Mistral, mini models, essentially, which comes in like 3 billion, 8 billion, and 14 billion. And of course, these models are pretty good. They compare very well. But Mistral doesn't try to compare these models in all these benchmarks against the frontier proprietary models. They compare them against the, rightfully so, as showing here, against the, like, for example, DeepSeek or the Kimi or Quen and other kind of models in their class, right? Generally the open weight models. And from that point of view, I think it's pretty good. Not like a leap in some of the dimensions, but it's basically catching up to some of the other really good models from, for example, DeepSeek, etc. as well. So those who are using Mistral, for them, it's a good news because they were waiting for it for quite some time.
Yeah, and I would say on that note too, like on the smaller models, as I mentioned before, and we showed in one of the other episodes, I have a fairly decent rig with NVIDIA GPUs, and I did download literally the day it came available the 14B and 8B, or 14 billion and 8 billion Mistral 3 models, and I have that running. So little plug, I'll be recording a small little demo using that against LM Studio and do some comparisons between the models, because I also have Gwen 14 billion model on that same rig. So I'll show some side-by-side compares. But to your point, Shadab, what they do is they kind of compare their 14 billion model against the Gwen 14 billion thinking, and you can see it's definitely above that. But what I find interesting is they're comparing it against like models. They're not trying to compare this against OpenAI or the Gemini models. They're doing it on the open weight open models that are out there, and obviously the Gwen models are the closest in terms of comparison. So
Yeah.
I'll give you a little heads up. The 14B model, it did pretty well, and I'm using it for a couple different scenarios on my own rig. But I'll show that and probably release that in a couple days.
And I've heard some good feedback, Jamie, within enterprise segments from corporate customers that Mistral models are actually pretty decent, right? They come pretty well on instructions following, and particularly the document processing kind of use cases, and particularly the international languages they are really good at. So many of the corporate customers are using them in the mix along with the GPT and the cloud model. So they do find some footing within the enterprise and corporate sectors.
Yeah, and I'll give one other plug. I mean, these are multimodal models, and it's got vision, just part of the model, which is really handy. Even on a 14 billion model, it's got multimodal capabilities incorporated within it.
And particularly in the EMEA segment, Mistrals are pretty popular in the French, in the Europe, in the Middle East. They support a lot of those languages, etc. Script, so they are pretty popular. Mistral may not be as popular, I would say, in the North America, but they are pretty, I would say, well established in the EMEA sectors.
Yep.
Okay. With this, I think that's a wrap, Jamie, for this week, and looking forward to the next week and more to discuss.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. And don't forget, tell your friends and subscribe if you're not a subscriber already.
See you. Bye, everyone.